Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair Anniversary Edition for the Nintendo Switch. This is a sequel to Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, and it's highly recommended that you watch my review of that previous game before you watch that one, as these games are very, very similar on a base level, but one really cool thing about Goodbye Despair is that it improved upon just about everything that Trigger Happy Havoc had to do. Except the graphics, those are still pretty ugly, but for the most part, a lot of things were touched up and tweaked. So I'm primarily going to be going over the changes, as well as what my thoughts are on the new characters and setting, and if I think the story is worth it. So a couple of changes right off the bat have to do with the hangout system. In the previous game, during your free time, you could hang out with one of your fellow students, and then that would help you get skills, or it would give you more skill points. Now, you always get what's called hope fragments whenever you succeed at a hangout, and then you use those hope fragments at an in-game store to purchase the skills. As far as skill points, you get skill points by leveling up. There's a pedometer on the top right of your screen, and every time you click on things, talk to people, or especially when you walk or run to get from area to area, you get level ups, and you can use those level ups to have more room to give you more skills. And what's really cool is that if you choose to replay a chapter that you've already done on your same save file, then your level up carries into that, so you could potentially be at level 52 when you would normally only be at maybe level 4 in the actual story progression. You also have the option of moving sideways between various areas. In the first game, you would always move in a first-person perspective through the school, but now, when you're on the central island, because now the game's setting is on a tropical island, you move Hajime, the new main character, from side to side, and then select a bridge to move to another island, and then on each island you still move from side to side to get to each individual area. There are a handful of first-person areas, including even an area that you can investigate in first person after a murder, but for the most part, the side-scrolling perspective helps to streamline things a lot more, and I greatly prefer it. So it ends up making the moments where you are in first person feel even more special as a result. As far as getting presents, there are now actually two different ways that you can get them in the overworld. There's the Mano machine, which for some reason the game calls a Yashin? Did they forget to put an M in there? And that's the same gambling system as the previous game, where the more Mano coins you put in, the more of a chance you have to buy a present. But you can also go to the supermarket to find a vending machine where you can just pick and choose which item you want, but they'll have fixed prices and fixed items. Now, as far as getting Mono Coins, you still get them by doing well in the class trials, but you also earn them not by randomly clicking on innocuous objects like in the first game, but now there are hidden Monokuma figures scattered throughout the island, and if you find one of those, then they'll automatically give you 10 Mono Coins, which is so much fun because it really tests your observational awareness. And not only that, but when you activate the toggle that tells you which objects are clickable in the room, the Monokuma is not applied to that. So you'll have to really think outside the box and really test if you're paying attention to the environment, as some of these figures are so well hidden, even I haven't found all of them, and I'm usually really good at games that involve environmental awareness. Now moving on to the courtrooms, these are also much more streamlined, as a lot of the mini-games are either easier, flat out more fun, or there's new features to make the trials more dynamic. For starters, there's a new mechanic called agreeing. Now in the previous game, and in pretty much every Ace Attorney game to date, if there's a contradiction that doesn't make sense with the evidence or someone else's testimony, then you would shoot it down with a truth bullet and say, "No, that's wrong!" But in this game, if you find blue wording, then you can shoot a truth bullet at it to agree with the statement and say, "I agree!" So it encourages the player to sometimes wonder if maybe your other students might have a point. So it gives more of a sense of camaraderie and working together, while at the same time also making the game slightly more challenging, but in a good kind of way, like it doesn't feel unfair. There's also a few new mini-games, such as the Rebuttal Showdown, where you have to slash at the words coming across the screen, then at the right time use the Truth Blade to literally cut through your opponent's remarks. Hangman's Gambit is much different than it was before. In the previous game, you would just shoot down the letters as they appeared on the screen, but now you have multiple letters coming in different directions of the screen, and you have to shoot two of the same letter to input that letter into the sentence or phrase that you're trying to make. However, if multiple letters try to hit each other, then they'll create an explosion, and that'll ruin your influence. Starting from Chapter 2 and beyond, you have a brand new minigame called Logic Dive, where Hajime basically looks at the facts of the case and tries to think of a logical reasoning. This takes the place of an early 3D type of surfing game, where your character is on a surfboard in a very ugly, half-pipe type of environment, kind of like the special stages in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. You can speed up and you can jump over obstacles, but more often than not, I found these exercises to be very mindless. Only on a handful of occasions did I actually fall off. And more often than not, the game was more or less on autopilot. It would provide these jumps with ramps automatically, so I wouldn't even have to think about jumping over. Maybe if the developers gave players the option of making tougher courses, that would be really cool. Then again, I also played on the easiest difficulty, so that would have to be something to test out one of these days. I also really like how they slightly improved the closing argument. They still didn't make it great, but now they at least make it a little bit clearer what each picture is, so that you at least somewhat know what it is that you're putting in the manga. Now, as far as the settings and the characters, I generally think for the most part this is a huge improvement over Trigger Happy Havoc. While it's true that the island setting does make for kind of a more like la-di-da kind of atmosphere, it doesn't feel as oppressive as the school walls, but at the same time it allows for more scenic variety. A lot of these cases have some really interesting visual perspectives and really unique settings that wouldn't be possible in just a simple school. Chapter 4 happens to be one of my particular favorites because I don't want to spoil anything, but it just goes to show you that even in an environment that's seemingly so vacation-y and relaxing, there can still be high tension. Monokuma is as funny as ever, but now he has like this assistant rabbit named Monami that's sort of the total opposite of him, in that she wants everyone to get along, whereas he's this sadistic bear that kind of tries to be likable, but at the same time he's forcing everyone to kill each other, so it doesn't always work. And the two of them generally bounce off of each other really well. I also think the voice acting is still really phenomenal. In some cases, I would even say it's better than the first game. Not necessarily because the actors in the first game did a good job, but just because the stakes are higher in certain areas, so now the voice actors have to step up their game. The class trials are still fully voiced, and they're still a blast to listen to, even if the grunts, when you're not in the trials, tend to get really annoying. Now, the reason why this is my favorite Danganronpa game boils down to the story. At times, the logic can really stretch itself really thin. Like, you kind of have to suspend your disbelief on a lot of occasions. But if you can look past that, there are some really creative setups for the scenarios that the characters get into. And the banter between them feels just as immaturely high schoolish as ever. The exception is Chapter 3. It seems like every single Danganronpa game has a bad Chapter 3, but this one takes the case for the worst out of all three of them. The plot feels like it was shoehorned in at the last moment, which it technically was, but that's a topic for another video. And they don't even really resolve a lot of loose ends. It just doesn't feel like the chapter is fully thought out, and they just put it in there because they had to pad out the game's running time. Not to mention that they switched the place of two of the characters in terms of one of them was supposed to survive, and yeah, it was a real mess. So I hope that Chapter 3 doesn't scare you off from the rest of the game, because it is really that awful, but it picks up the very next chapter and beyond. Overall, I think Goodbye Despair is my favorite game in the Danganronpa trilogy. It has amazing settings, fantastic voice acting, the courtrooms are even more fun than ever, and the minigames have been tweaked and tooled to overall just be much more enjoyable. I don't think Chapter 3 is that great, and I still think the game looks very ugly, but at the same time, an ugly game can still produce good results if the gameplay itself is satisfying. And the addition of the pedometer really helps with you trying to explore the environments and walk around as opposed to just fast traveling like you would a lot of the times in the first game. So yet again, highly recommend that you buy this, but the caveat is that make sure you've played Trigger Happy Havoc first, or at the very least beaten it, because there's going to be a lot of things, especially in the late game, that aren't going to make sense if you jump into this as your first Danganronpa game, which is the mistake I made when I was watching my friends stream this. So please don't be an idiot like me and play the games in order. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know if I missed anything, and if you have any comments, critiques, or concerns. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and I hope the next time you go on a tropical vacation, it doesn't involve trying to kill each other. Bye!